Let's continue with this series from where we left, and today we are looking into read operations in MongoDB. Remember we started with the create, which was used to insert documents into a database, and today we take it a step further. We look into read, which is used to query data from a database. So just a refresher, let's switch to our database. I said you switch using use, which is Mongo train. So already on Mongo train, which is our database, and then let's view the collections. Show collections. We have residents, and then now let's start querying our database, which is reading. Find method. Now to read or query documents from your collection, you use the find method. db dot the collection name, which is residents dot find. That will return the entire list of your documents from your collection. That is how you send a read to your collection, and then it returns for you the data or the documents from that collection. Read can also be done using find one. When we type db.residents.find1, and then find one takes the filter object. Filter object, here you specify the criteria of the data that you want back. Let's assume we want to query the document that's the name Alice Johnson. How do we do that? After typing db.residents.find1, open the bracket, open the filter object, and then pass the filter object. We want to query by name, and the criteria is find a name that is Alice Johnson. Alice. Close the query filter, close the bracket. Now that will return for us only one document, that is Alice Johnson. Now what happens when we have two names that are Alice Johnson and we use find one? Now let's do this. Let's insert the Alice Johnson once again. Then I'm going to show you what happens with the find one method. We use db.residents one, and then pass the document, which is the same document of Alice Johnson. So copy that, copy, and then just paste it right here, paste, and then close the method. That will insert a new document, Alice Johnson. Now let's do find one. Remember, now we have two Alice Johnsons in our collection, and to verify that, let's first do the find. db.residents.find. So look here, on top here we have Alice Johnson, that is 1. Again we have Alice Johnson 2. Now let's run again the find one command to see what happens when we try to query the document that has the name Alice Johnson. db.residents.find1, and then the query object is name, and the name that you want to find is Alice Johnson. Close the query object, close the method. What do we find? We see that we find the name Alice Johnson. Only one document is returned, even though we have two documents. So find one will always refine the first document that it encounters in your collection, irrespective of the number of the documents that meet the criteria. Find one will only refer the first element in your collection. Now, what if you want to find all the Johnsons that we have in our collection? Now in that case, you don't use find one, you use find, and then pass the filter object. Let's try that. CLS to clear our terminal, and then db.residents.find, and then now we pass the query object, which is name, and then the value is Alice Johnson. Close the query object, close the method. Now you see the difference. Now the find will return all the documents that meet that criteria, Alice Johnson. So we have two Alice Johnson, that is Alice Johnson that was inserted yesterday and Alice Johnson that we've just inserted right now. That is how you differentiate between find one and find. Find one will always find only, return one document, and find one must be accompanied by a filter object. Find, you can use find on its own without a query object, and it will return all the documents at collection. Let me explain that once more. Find will return everything. If you don't pass any query parameter or any filter object, it will return all the documents in your collection. db.residence.find. This will return every document in your collection, as you can see here, without any criteria. Now, what if we use db.residence.find and also pass a filter object? Now, this one will specify the criteria or the criteria that of the subset data that we want to extract from our collection. A good example was the one that I used, Alice Johnson. So let me just redo it one more time so that you can understand it. Name, Alice Johnson. Alice Johnson. So you see, it returns only 2 documents that meets our filter object, and the find one will only return the first one that it encounters. That is one. Number 2, let's understand how to return only a specific field from your query. I'll use the same query we have here. So here I have db.residence.find, and I want the name Alice Johnson. And from data that is returned, I only want to see the email field and the name field. So how do I do that? Now, inside this method, after the filter object, pass the comma and then open another projection object. So here you specify the fields that you want to ignore and the fields that you want to return. I want to only project the name and the email. How do I do that? Type the name and then pass 1, and then comma, also pass the email and pass 1. Now, this one tells our database that we want to find documents from our database where the name is Alice Johnson, and the data that's returned should only show us the name and the email, or we only want to project the name and the email. So let's press enter and see what we get back. Good. You see, we only get the ID, the name, and the email. But remember, we didn't specify the ID here to be returned. Now, by default, the find will always return the ID field, which means if you want to ignore the ID field, you have to explicitly tell it to ignore the ID field. Let's demo that to make it make more sense. To do that, we have to come here and specify that for the ID, which is underscore ID, please don't return it by giving it a 0. Okay, then press enter. Fantastic. Now that will give us only the name, Alice Johnson, and the email, which is the email of Alice Johnson. Okay, so we've looked at how to find one, how to use find with a filter object, and now I want to show you how to use find, but you want to limit the number of documents returned. Assuming a scenario where you have thousands of documents, you don't want to fetch all these documents at once. This will be intensive in the server, and it will give us unnecessary load and a long waiting time. What you want to do, you want to limit, for example, in the first fetch, you want to fetch only 10 documents or just 2 documents. And this is the concept that is applied in pagination when building applications. In paginations, the first load, you only load 10 documents, and then when you click on the next page, you get the next 20 documents or 10 documents. So let me show you. First, let's find out how many documents we have. So db.residence.count documents. Now this one is going to show us the number of documents that we have in our collection, which is residence. So we only have 5 documents. Okay, now let's do the find. db.find, db.residence.find. This will return the 5 documents to us. We have 1, we have 2, we have 3, we have 4, and we have 5. Good. Now, assuming we only want the first 2 documents returned to us, how do we execute that? To execute that, you need to chain your query or your method with the limit method. Now, in limit, you'll accept a number. This number specifies the number of documents that should be returned. So let's say 2. Press enter. Now, this one returns only the first two documents, and that is how you limit the number of documents returned when you perform a query. This will increase the performance, will reduce the wait time, and also will not exert a lot of load on our server. Now, to recap on what we've learned today, we've learned how to use find without a filter object, find with the filter object, find one which must accept a filter object, and we've also seen how to find a specific subset of data or limits to the first two or any number of documents that you want to be returned to you using the limit. So thank you for watching the video. See you in the upcoming videos. Osego Codes signing out.